Dr. Paul Dyer. We'll be talking with UJIMA People's Progress Party. And we're going to be talking about politics, black politics. And that seems to scare a lot of people. It has scared a lot of people. It has always scared people when black people really start talking about their own party and politics and having their own. It just seems like there's something that many people don't want to hear, but it's really scary that black people don't ever want to talk about it. And that seems to be one of our issues as a collective community that we need to correct. If not now, when? And we've said this since 1960. If people know the history, this is not something that is new, but it's something that must be done. Brandon, please introduce yourself and tell us about what we're going to be talking about today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brandon Walker. I'm with the UJIMA People's Progress Party based out in Baltimore City, but we're looking to build branches and chapters all across the 23 counties in Maryland. And today, pretty much, we're looking forward to learning, or if not getting more ingratiated with independent Black politics and helping the UJIMA People's Progress Party either spread the word by helping us get on the ballot with 10,000 petition signed signatures in the state of Maryland, either by joining a political education class, making the subtle donations, or just sharing the information that we have available about our journeys and also the everyday struggle, what it takes to reach out to everyday folks and community laypersons on the importance of organizing as an alternative and fighting to fight back programs and win power back to the people outside of the electoral two-party system.
I'm always very, having these shows, doing these shows for a long time. I'm very transparent. I do not like the two-party system. I worked with a person who ran on the Green Party ticket for president. Ralph Nader. I'm just not for the two party. I think it's been corrupt since Lincoln. So here's the caveat to this. And like I said in my opening statement, if people have any questions or comments, please put in your comments and through all your social medias. We'll get to it later. If we don't get to it now, we'll answer your questions. But people are afraid to talk about black politics. And have you found that out when you're putting this together? This is historic because we tried to do this with the Black Panther. We tried to do this with different types of movement, the social movement. And when you talk about this, a lot of people are just frightened by it. They literally run to the hills. Why do you think that is, Brandon?
Thank you for asking that question, and that's a very legitimate and valid question as well. So I think a lot of times when the reference is made, Black politics is often perceived as a misnomer, as something that's beyond radical. It gets associated with revolutionary, when in reality it's not revolutionary because it's been done before. It's something that was introduced looking at the 1972 Gary, Indiana, National Black Independent Political Party convention, and coming back at least exactly 1 month and 1 week ago, there was the commemoration of that in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where the new African Independence Political Party, they have ballot status on a local level. So it's just to say that when people hear the Black political party, they're assuming their ideas with, oh man, this is going to be, like the Black Panther Party, this is going to be aggressive, it's going to be assertive, it's going to be everything that dismisses the idea of the American values. But I want to make sure I expound on that clearly from an independent Black worker-led political party perspective in UJIMA. It's clear to say that to be draped inside of the American hypocrisy and also the political hegemony of the two-party system, you support or at least have the interest in mind of a capitalist, sexist, and racist society. Because if you don't, then the question often asks, how do you carry a Democratic Party? How are you a card-carrying member of the Democratic Party or the Republican Party when both parties do agree that reparations is something that they're not going to support on their platform? Equal pay for women is something that they're not going to support. And they're both just as much as racist as much as they are sexist when it comes down to compounding the ideas on what to pay workers, just as we saw in 2020 with the disposable worker that was being done. So when it's being brought up about independent Black political parties, it's safe to assume, or it's safe to say that these are going to be ideas that's put up front, because everyone has a Black agenda during the time of elections, primary in general, but they don't have it outside of the election.
No, it disappears. People, the one thing, it just, and people know how I feel about Obama. I don't think he was a really good president. I don't think he did anything for the Black community. Not that he was supposed to only do things for the Black community, but he really didn't highlight anything that we needed. And that goes back to that two-party system. I think he has to play in that arena. And I think anyone who's in the system has to play in that arena. We recently, if most people don't know, in July here at Morgan State, we had a Black Action Convention. And it was just basically based off of Gary, Indiana, bringing Black people together so we could talk about the crisis in the Black community. And yet we put it together super fast. We try to get out here before early voting, and not enough either heard, knew about it. Even after we sent out letters to different organizations and grassroots, there was still people attended. Great. Do we want more? Absolutely. Will this happen again next year? Absolutely. So this is a continuous process. And it's about, we keep talking about it's education, education, education. But the same people are being educated, and the people who are not educated still don't show up. Watu, it seems like you have a question. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I want to disagree with your opening remarks as well, because I don't think it was a lack of response from the people, because as you compared it to the made mention of the Black Panther Party, the Black Panther Party was able to build. They were able to build in the interests of the African working class at that time. But subsequent to that, I think the attempts by in Gary, the attempts by other organizations, you said you had an attempt over the weekends. A lot of times it's those that are organizing and putting together a platform. The Black Panthers platform clearly spoke to the needs and the concerns of Black people at that time. Perhaps it's the agenda and the goals and objectives of these organizations that needs to be looked at, rather than to point the finger at the people. Because in my short period working for UJIMA, every person, every African I've ever encountered, never hesitated to want, or never disagreed with the ideas of a Black political party. That I've never had anybody say that disagreed with it, that it wasn't something that needed to be. They all wanted to enter into discussion about it.
And now we have to assess value. We have to put money behind this. This is, yes, we can have emotional push, but we definitely have to have what you call a monetary push, because we are just not valued at all. Just like Brandon said, we're not valued as workers, we're not valued as people, but we are such consumers as a race of people. We spend more money than anyone when it comes to buying product, but we don't put money towards our own people. And this can be corrected with this People's Progress part with UJIMA. Is that possible?
Yes, and to some degree, it would require more struggle than just that monetary input. And here's why it has to be expressed, because when we're speaking from a class interest or a class analysis perspective, we understand that the two-party system or the political hegemony that exists on the surface, they spend millions in advertising, right, as well as the capitalist machine spend billions in advertising. And as you mentioned in conversations prior to this call, we're dealing with, psychological manipulation. Yeah. So therefore, the same way as someone who may have an addiction to a drug or a carcinogen, a cigarette, or anything for that matter, there are things that's being put in front of us in a mechanized way that is being supported by tax-funded dollars or public-funded dollars. So when we're talking about UJIMA or an independent Black worker-led political party, we're talking about everyday workers that's connected to teachers union, that's connected to workers union, that's connected to women's union, that's connected to also our LGBTQ kindred in the community, to be able to say, hey, we have a class-centric view that your dollars will support dollar for dollar, but also we're speaking of, hey, don't just donate and walk away.
Right.
You would like to be involved in the process when it comes to mutual aid, when it comes to block parties, when it comes to community back to school giveaways, but more importantly, when it gets involved with the question of, okay, who's going to advocate for, equal pay for women? Who's going to advocate for an anti-sexist bill? Who's going to advocate for, an anti-racist position from a class-centric view that many poor working class African and Black people inside the state of Maryland alone are dealing with the misrepresentation inside that political hegemony that not only takes their dollars from their workplace and supports philanthropies and corporations that in turn supports a political party that pays for war, pays for bombs and bullets. And here we are in 2022 that it's easier to get your hands on a gun or a military weapon than it is to get infamil or anything that you need to take care of your family.
That's right.
That's not a mistake. That's something that we want to be able to use political education. And as you mentioned, Dr. Dyer, that we do appreciate the donations, but I think that anything that gets supported without a follow-up initiative, it can easily be misused, or if not misdirected as, oh, they're taking my support, but they're not representing my views. But we asking folks to get involved in the political process, to know your rights, to know your representative, know your councilman, know your district. And after you do that, ask the unasked questions, but also be willing to stand behind the things that you support, because they're taking the resources that's being given throughout the tax-funded basis, and they're divvying it up amongst themselves and getting it from the lobbyists that are advocating for higher car insurance, that are advocating for things that hurt average working class people. So for us, we're saying, hey, these resources, whether they be $1, $10, $100, or $1,000, if it comes from a working class individual inside a working class party, then you can believe that they'll be a part of the participatory process of being able to vote and delegate and see, hey, how can I use these resources inside of a political party that's independent and for Black workers in my community to be able to support what we got going on as, a collective unit.
One of the things is, and it's not just anything to do with Black or anything to do with any party or a group of people. There has been negative things and there has been positive things. So I'm not even going to give my breath to the negative things. But there's still pushback of money going into places, people giving their energy, and then it goes nowhere, and they seem like they get nothing in return. I think people have to realize this is not about a return. This is about a process and a progress. And if we have to stop looking at, if I give this, then what do I get? Well, if you look at it that way, it's not a slot machine. So how do you speak to that type of mentality? Because that is trauma inflicted. Like, I get nothing out of it is if I help or if I donate or if I serve, because that seems to be where people are stuck in the majority. And remember, we're only 17% in the United States.
Right. So that's also a great question too. Thank you for that. So the idea has to be, if we're talking about reciprocity or anything for that matter, then look at, what have your vote and your dollars towards someone's political campaign who holds your vote ransom through a proposition to say, if you elect me, I'll deal with inflation. But you don't have a machine to deal with inflation before you get elected.
Right.
So you're just saying, based on the contingencies, if we're able to put you in the position of power, you can give power back to the people. That's hocus pocus. And no, really, it is. And what we're saying, just as an independent Black worker-led political party, is that the realities have to speak to people's everyday material needs to say that, hey, no one is asking you to finance an idea that you that you're not a part of, and no one is telling you to finance any root program like you're attending the church or religious institution that you don't know whether or not that root program has been paid for 5 and 10 times over before you ever see a shingle fixed on top of the building you worship at.
Stokely Carmichael said the same thing.
Yes.
And it's like are we repeating ourselves, or repeating ourselves to people who don't know, or repeating ourselves to, like, who are we trying to talk to if they're not listening to opening up? Like, stop repeating this mess.
I say we have to target, again, poor working class, anywhere where people are, and treat our relationships as more like bridges or a highway for that matter. Each relationship you make must connect to something that someone is dealing with on their personal level, their local level, and material level. Because the idea is that we can't just often assume that just because we see someone with a car that they can afford the cost of living.
Right.
We can't assume that someone, if they're a homeowner, that they can afford, their mortgage or anything for that matter. But what we can do is be able to have those meaningful relationships and those concepts and connections and be able to break the grip of a two-party system by being able to say, hey, how is it that there's resources for Ukraine and other places around the world, but here we cannot get aid or support for poor and working class people. Here we cannot get a livable wage to combat the rising cost of inflation. Or here folks are forced to choose between education and employment, healthcare and housing. And we live in a nation that just proved it 2 years ago that there was more than enough resources to make sure that everyone have what they need and stay home
Right.
to battle COVID. So speaking with folks and not, pretty much, I guess, running a hamster wheel or running in circles, sometimes it's going to often take some drastic or some consistent contradictions, as I would say, to play themselves out to be able to say, as the Minister Malcolm said, we put them in the doghouse, we put them in the big house, they put us in the doghouse. And that's to be reiterated to say, hey, after remember to vote in November, the question becomes, does your material conditions change? Has you been politically educated on the fact that some of the things that make you more in danger, or should I say more threatening to the presence of over-policing, an inflated police budget, has that helped your community? But more importantly, how can you relate the fact that there's more resources going towards creating criminalization inside of our community instead of anti-recidivism programs that can produce, livable citizens and folks who just need the basics of housing, healthcare, education, food, transportation, and employment? These conversations have to be had on a molecular level or on a micro level so we can have a macro transition into understanding that poverty is maintained in this country and it is a form of oppression on the state and local level to keep folks divided between classes and ideology. So as an independent Black worker-led political party, we have to strive to be able to reach as many people as possible and not dismiss people because of their ideas and their background, but rather have a formal disagreements to be able to say, hey, we believe that there is a system that can be created that where we can build and work towards some unison where oppressed people who are on the workplace and go home to communities where they're being oppressed by the same state machine and political mechanics can be able to organize around their class interests and not have blackface working in white power or in servitude of white power to misrepresent our values and interests simply because they're inside of a political chambers, which we rarely have access to because we're working our tails off to stay alive.
We are going to go into, we have security issues. We have security issues for our own people. We have food deserts, as we know. And then we're not even going to get into that's always been the alcohol, it's always been the drugs, it's always been these other things. But let's go with just food security and personal security. Are these things that can be corrected by UJIMA and the People's Progress Party?
Now, I'll be the first to say that that's something that we've always had a struggle with because it's often associated that a political party's, position is to be able to provide and do these things. Now, I understand where that comes from because there's always been a dependence in a dependence inside a parasitic symbiotic system of the Republican Democrats and those who are on the ballot. And I want to reiterate that clear just by, some of the images, if you were to visit our website and our social media pages. We work with community leaders who receive mutual aid from different resources. And no one's in any question to question those resources because if you're hungry, you're going to get something to eat.
No matter what.
Thirsty, you're going to get something to drink, no matter what. Right. So the idea to use the visions, or should we say the material circumstance, to question that this is what everyday folks and community leaders and activists must do to keep themselves alive. A political party should be there to play the process of saying, hey, you know, we support the idea of having a food bank inside of our community rather than having to go to Maryland Food Bank. They can provide the food for all 23 counties, but why not have it district by district, block by block, where communities can have them and a political party can be there to say, oh, come learn about reparations. Oh, come learn about a social and economic justice platform. Oh, tonight we're going to have a forum around police brutality and how to have, you know, a civilian review board for community control of policing. Those kind of things is what a political party can do to not just complement the process of folks being able to build fight back programs in their community, but in any case where there aren't any candidates or any political party that's on the ballot, you still have a mechanism for power in your community or a base to be built that folks are doing for self, are helping one another, are making sure that no one comes up missing. And I heard you mention too about, you know, guns and safety and also, you know, the material needs as is being met. The idea should be, we should also be educating ourselves on swim classes, on how do we learn CPR and CPR and healthcare for that matter, or looking at, you know, individual concepts on community emergency responses as opposed to dialing 911 and getting the police and ended up in body bags when we should be walking back home or coming back home to our loved ones. And just to end it, just pretty much to that point that you were asking, because I know it was a loaded question that I've answered to as well. It should really be important that looking at history to reward the research on why we have to build independent power, but more importantly, work with each other in our community, is that there are too many examples from Hurricane Harvey, from Katrina, from any disasters on down to Haiti and and earthquakes and all kinds of things that happen to poor and working class African Black people worldwide, that we have to be the ones to save ourselves. You know, there are no saviors that are coming to save us. So we could be able to be pragmatic about saying, hey, we learn how to, you know, do CPR. We learn how to patch each other up from a gun or flesh shot wounds. Because if we're not doing that to work with one another who knows the skills and talents to protect one another in our community, then we be just as responsible as the system is as a meat house sending lambs to slaughter, and we be the ones walking them through the door to the slaughterhouse.
You know, my wife just finished giving a CPR class, and she's been teaching CPR, first aid, basic life support system, and I've been teaching security issues along with trauma and things like that. And we totally believe if you don't know how to help someone, then how do you help anyone, right? That's one of those things you talk about. We are losing people in the streets because they cannot stop a bleed. And there's different pushes we go on with communities across the country with different organizations we call Stop the Bleed. But it's not as prevalent all over the place. Stopping the bleed before the ambulance gets there, before anyone gets there, before any police gets there, there's things we can do that we don't do. And we don't do it because we have not learned how to do it. So we offer these classes. We say, please get taught to learn how to stop the bleed. Watu, you have your hand raised, please.
Yes, no, yeah, Brandon, I was really impressed by your response, and the whole question around security entails any organization that's working on behalf of their people, the interests of their people, that should never allow somebody else to be responsible for the feeding of their people. We understand that we're in a military battle right now, and we have to provide the needs to provide food, clothing, and shelter, and all the other survival apparatuses that people needs, struggling people needs in their march towards freedom. I think the one thing we have to eat in the heads of our people to get them to understand that we're under assault. That when that guy Nixon declared war on drugs, it wasn't just a drug war; it was an all-out assault, and we see the continuation of that. The other thing Brother Brandon said, I think we have to emphasize too, is political education, so that because we know that there's a lot of as Malcolm referred to him as Uncle Tom's, people out here who's going to work against our interests, and they're doing it. We had just had a president that did that, and I agree with you, brother, that he never did anything. He was obligated to do for us. He did for every other nationality, not every. He did it for the so-called Chicano Mexicano. He did everything they asked from him. And he said the reason was that they asked for it, and we didn't ask for it. Bullshit. We shouldn't have had to ask for it. We have to arm our people and make our people aware through educating and through identifying these people. The event that you was just at here in Frederick, that you made it a part. I made it a part of my work there Saturday of identifying to some of the members that are in our organization, those people in the community who was out there that day, and let them know what their political position was in reference to Black people. So we have to identify that and be clear on how we respond to them traitors when they go up for office. You know, we have to. Well, anyway, yes, I think political education is extremely important.
You know, one of the things that Malcolm did, as many people in that time, is that they call it preaching on the street, but it wasn't preaching; it was communicating on the street. You know, they had what you call the street pulpit. They would stand there and then say, if you want to learn more, and I grew up in New York, they would be out there. If you want to learn more, come here.
Soapbox.
Right. We don't have that. So how are we going to reach our people when our people are either working 2 jobs, traveling on public transportation, trying to get home, trying to get the many things they're trying to do to survive? And as Brother Watu says, we're out here in an all-out war. So if people are just trying to get by, we have it very difficult to reach them, because it's not like you could call them up on a telephone or reach them on social media, because everyone's not going to the same place in social media. As many you can have Black social media this or something that could funnel people into this. We don't even control that algorithm, so we don't even get that news. We have stations called Black News Radio. How many guys have heard that radio station? Raise your hand. And what do you think? Do they ever talk about something that we need to learn? It seems like they're still promoting concerts. What the fuck, Pete? What? You got to be kidding me. You're talking about concerts and
about the celestial radio station
and hip hop, but what we got people starving and getting shot out here, and you're talking about concerts. I was pissed.
Yes, there are.
Go ahead, Brandon.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, just quickly to that point, that's another idea where we talk about mass propaganda. There's pretty much a realization that has to come with the times where what we seeing in our hand versus what we seeing on the dumb box or the television, as one can put it, you know, what we hear on radio versus the common reality is that so many folks are confronted with the engagements of propaganda, where you could take tobacco just as a prime example to relate that to Black news media. A lot of times, the tobacco industries, the Comcast, the Affinities, these multinational corporations, they donate to your not your council, but your legislative Black caucuses, the congressional Black caucuses.
Yep.
How else are they able to compete with their counterparts on Capitol Hill if they're not able to dip their hands in the same cookie jar or taste the same honey pot and sweetness and nectar of capitalism to be able to produce two messages out of both sides of their mouth? So I'm just saying that, you know, in essence to what, you know, everyone has been brought to the table about, you know, the contradictions in media, and to say that we do need to engage folks based off of the topography of where they are, like whether you're in Western Maryland, you bring your message to the mountains, you go wherever people are. If you're in the urban city, put up posters or wherever you can. And you also have multiple events, like where there's a festival happening in Frederick, if there's a festival happening in Montgomery County or anywhere, you converge at these areas and you engage people, because the idea is that we're playing pretty much a protracted struggle while they're engaging in the numbers game and say, hey, you know, we're able to spend $100 million to reach 1 billion people. We're guaranteed to get 100,000 new faces, $500,000, and more money inside of our coffers from corporate and wealthy donors to continue to push their interests onto everyone while we stay in Annapolis and Capitol Hill and in the local legislatures to misrepresent the interests of those who vote for us for one reason, but keep us in the office for another.
I think, Brandon, I want you to say that line again when you say misrepresentation and be very clear. When you say misrepresentation, it doesn't mean they don't know what they should be doing. It doesn't mean that the people don't know what they could be doing. When we talk about misrepresentation, people, and then this is when you hear this on Bridges Live and out there, misrepresentation means they know exactly what they're doing and they choose not to do. That's misrepresentation. And that's the difference. Sometimes we give people the benefit going, well, maybe they just didn't know. No, those days are over. There's too much information out here for our legislative people, for our people to have all these fingers in all these communities, for them not to know and still not do. Now, here's the other thing. If they're unable to do, then let us know how come and what for. And that's not being done.
Yeah, you know what? You said it in a nutshell, Dr. Dyer, as well, that I know that Y2 and others on this call can agree. There's a Black misleadership class that we're dealing with, where the misleadership we're dealing with in our classes on the local level, the state level, and the national level, federal level for that matter, is that, sending them or putting them in office does not win you power. It does not put your material conditions over those who have $500,000 and up. It does not put your social conditions or the social economics that we're dealing with every day, from if we're inside of an affluent community without any ID or any organization attached to what we're belonging as a class analysis, then more likely we're going to be subjected to the forces of those who have more money and more resources than us to stick the police on us. So those misrepresentation or Black misleadership class that are in the form of misrepresentation is that they can say, hey, Black Lives Matter, but on the other hand, they get funded by the Fraternal Order of the Police. They can say African people are the people that we should be supporting, but on the other hand, they're sending money to Israel, to invade Palestine. So these are just, again, they're games, or should I say more tricks, trades, and charades that are being done that in the simplest form, the Black misleadership class and political misrepresentation is how lions for lambs get traded.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Brandon. I think we have to go back in our most recent history and take a few pages out of what the Black Panthers were doing down on the street level, because at that time there was a semblance of power inside of our communities, and the Black Panthers to a large degree brought that into existence. But the Panthers didn't have time to organize and develop and grow themselves like they wanted to, because this government constantly kept them in and out of the courtrooms like they did the Move family up in Philadelphia. But they didn't have time to go out there and do that. The political education was a vital part of they recognized the necessity and the importance of it. So I think we got to take a page out of their book and be back out in those streets and struggle on a daily basis with the people and with those people that are out there parading to be representative of us. Sometimes I think we have an advantage up here in Frederick, being in a small town, because we don't have to compete. There's so many ideologies. I know my times in Baltimore and other cities got all these other ideologies and these other philosophies rotating, so you got to compete with that. Pretty much, we up here in Frederick, we had an advantage. So most of the people up here, outside of the NAACP, that's it.
The history of Frederick is Klan territory. Is that correct?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. It's not just
Klan headquarters
history, but recent history. Yeah. It's still there. Yes.
So one of the things, and Brandon, you're just not going to be a like person, but I know you're okay with that. Baltimore's not a like city, so you're good with that. One of the things, if you feel uncomfortable of calling organizations fraternities, sororities, groups, organizations that say they are for us, but when you call upon them, they never show up.
That's a great one. In fact, now that you mention it, you brought up pretty much the municipality where the 2020 census for Frederick was last counted as 271,000, according to the state of Maryland, and Baltimore City is declining. So clearly, when we're speaking about organizations, fraternities, boules, or sororities that exist inside the sphere or the nexus of the political hegemony that exists in the state of Maryland or anywhere in one of the local 23 counties, the idea is that, hey, when speaking with them, whether it be at a festival or in a one-on-one conversation, I think it's really as fairly as say, hey, we're looking for our right to exist as an independent political party. We believe that Black people, voting class people, working class people should have an alternative and access to a ballot to be able to be on the primaries and fight for open primaries, as well as be a part of the general elections. So how do you stand for egalitarian values when the party that you support or that you're a card-carrying member of, they do whatever it takes to keep third parties off the ballot and have you believe that, okay, 2 options is better than 3, 4, and 5, because maybe a third or fourth option or something that speaks more to your class interest on a local level and a material level is better. Maybe someone who say, hey, I don't like what's going on at the school board. I'm going to go talk to, the board commissioner. I'm going to go knock on his door. We're going to have a dinner. We're going to talk. Or we're going to go speak with her, or they. However it's presented. And the idea just about it, when we speak about organizations out of 23 counties, we're not saying that we're going to be successful to speak to 100% people. That's unrealistic in my mind. Instead, there's probably organizations to say, hey, can we come and vend at your event? We don't want to sell anything. No, we're not cash heavy, or no, we're not flush with resources, but all we want to do is spread influence. So you mean to tell me that it's okay for someone to sell $15 packs worth of cigarettes inside of a community, a liquor store, and everything that hastens death? They can get your support as long as they let you stick a flag outside of their store that say that you support their party and you support this candidate, but we shouldn't exist to have a right to be able to contend and build dual power and fight back programs inside of our community across the state of Maryland. I think it shows the hypocrisy and the dichotomy that exists within people's mind frame to say that, hey, you want progress, but you don't want change. You want resolution, but you're afraid of cultural and social revolution. You want to see women's rights acknowledged, but you don't want to see equal pay for women. So it's like, hey, you got to pick one side and stay on it. You can't just, play to the favors of the masses, or as the song says, lying to the racists, just in smiling faces. So I'll end that note on this, right? We're up south, pretty much above the pretty much below the Mason-Dixon line, up south and down south.
By 20 miles.
By 20 miles, right? Yeah. Where when people talk about racism, we're dealing with the racism that does with smile and style, where below down south, they do it with a straight face and a handshake. So you know the devil you're dealing with versus the one you're getting in bed with and don't know what you're gonna wake up to.
But most people don't know this throughout the country, that Maryland's the battleground state. It has been since the Civil War, and it has never stopped. Because if it works in Maryland, you can push it all out through the rest of the part of the North. Because the South doesn't. There is no contingencies for the South. There's just racism all through the South, even though there's Black people in this mayor, Black people in this. But if it works in Maryland, then the Democratic people for the North go, oh, look, it could work in New York, New Hampshire, so on, and all the northeastern part of the states.
Dr. Paul.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I would be interested. We got some of our members here from Frederick on this call.
Absolutely.
I would be interested if they could make some comments, because recently we had a situation here that involved some of the fraternal organizations taking a absolute stance against us based on what their masters was telling them. So I was wondering if they could share their comments with that.
Go ahead. It's
Akila, Jared, or I don't want to put you on the spot because y'all.
Well, he actually did. He just said he actually did. He doesn't want to put you on the spot, but he called your names. Akila, you better speak now. Shit.
Well,
Yeah,
I think my hand is up. So I don't want to take.
I'll take it down.
Oh, that's your hand, Dad.
Yeah.
But I would just speak on that when you take an interest or join any type of political organization, or because everything is political, whatever you take a stance on and you join it, to know the intricacies and as was stated in here, the interest of those groups, because just in our organizing, when you're doing things for the people, for the community, when another organization, when you're planning things and another organization may come in and try to railroad it or hijack it or take it in another direction,
You're among friends, you can name names.
Well, actually, yeah, she's among friends, but it's going out live, and it is on a podcast. So people be like, Keela, you said this, so maybe she don't. Hey, you're not gonna be outside her front door when they throwing bricks through her house.
Yes, I will.
Well,
she lives here.
well, that's my dad. But this goes across a lot of organizations. I think it's in general, because I don't think that people are alone in that this is just a one-off thing. I think that just that people, predominantly African-led organizations, need to have African people's interests at the forefront, and I think that many don't, and that's a big problem, because maybe they don't understand politically the climate that we're in, but whether they are knowingly being blind to it or unknowingly. I just think that there needs to be better leadership and more knowledgeable people in positions of power, where they just have our interests in the forefront.
So here, Keela, I'm going to say it a little bit more bluntly.
Yeah.
I have asked organizations one time, will you be here? And they don't show up. So the next time I have a show, the week after, I'm like, I asked the Deltas. They didn't show up. I asked the Qs. They didn't show up. I asked these other, where were you? And they say, well, no. You mean you couldn't send no one? Anyone? As a representative, how many people you got? 30, 20, 10, 6? And no one can show up, or no one can call and say, hey, we got busy, my dog got hit. I don't care what it is, but that's our problem. We don't even support each other when we have organizations that says in mission statement, we are supporting each other. So how does that work? But if you have a pink party or a white party or some other goddamn party, everyone's out there dancing. I'm confused. How does that work? I've been a Mason traveler my whole life for a long time. And there's people out there who are just not putting on their aprons and getting to work. And I've called them out. Where's your Grand Lodge? We got people dying out here, and you guys are having meetings. Bump that noise. Yeah. Go ahead, Jared.
Yeah, Jared.
I appreciate the hard-hitting question, and it has to be answered. So, in terms of the organizational outreach, it can be very difficult, because speaking as somebody who was part of an organization or fraternity, I joined it at the college level. Right. And of course, at that point, it's really looked upon as more of a social, not only just a group of outreach and service, but more it's social. I mean, to keep it real, like, you're going for the parties, and that's kind of what really draws you in as a undergrad. But for certain individuals, it really is about the work. And, you know, you may have those individuals who are presidents, vice presidents, what have you, in leadership positions, but they have to agree as a collective.
I agree.
And if one person says, yes, I want to do it, and maybe you can have 6 other people say, nah, that's not a good idea.
So here's the thing, Jared. I don't want to push back on you because I agree. There's organizational benefits to this. And I'm not taking away from the things they do. Let's go with that. And if anyone hears me and says, well, we do all this. Yes, you do. I'm not saying the things you do isn't amazing, great, and awesome. But there's times we really do need you to show up visually. We're not talking monetary. We're just talking visual, because we have to be a collective group. And I think this is why we become so devalued, because they know they're like, well, they're not showing up and they're not showing up, and they have the means to show up, at least send one person, and they don't even show up. So as a community, why should I show up? And hold on, I'm not leaving off the hook the churches. So don't get it twisted. Where people will congregate, they don't show up. Really, no one from the staff? No one. How many elders you got in your church? How many people go to your church and no one shows up? Come on now. That's where it really hurts. And Brandon, and starting UJIMA and the People's Progress Party, we don't have just issues to deal with. If we could just show up, we could do so much better, but we have a hard time showing up. Go ahead, Watu.
I just want to pass this along.
You're a troublemaker. You're a troublemaker. I know that right now. You're a troublemaker. Yes, you are. I know it. I've been doing shows for you. We gotta watch you. FBI's already watching you, but we gotta watch you.
But I've been working with UJIMA and Brother Nami and Brandon for a few years now. But I had a conversation with another member, a young member, just here recently, that Brandon alluded to the fact that Frederick is a growing population out here. There's a lot of Africans out here, and it's a result of the gentrification that's inflicting Baltimore and Washington metropolitan areas. The one thing that I would like to, I hope no one gets offended. I'm not saying this to offend anyone. But when we get a lot of our brothers and sisters from the cities, and they come out, well, we're going out to the country, and we're going to educate these folks. You know, that kind of arrogance is a big turnoff. And we see it being dominated by a lot of people that are in these fraternal organizations. We just had an event here, Juneteenth, a very successful event. And we started out 6 or 7 years ago, saying that we wanted this to be a community effort. We made specific attempts to invite the Deltas, the Kappas, the Lappas, the Lambas, and all of them. And they refused for years. They refused. Then this year, the founding fathers endorsed reparations. They said, we recognize reparations as being an official holiday. And they went, and that message gravitated with the fraternity and sororities. So they took it upon themselves to have a Juneteenth event that was totally separate from us, outside of the Black community, because Sons of Reawakening, which is our organization, doesn't like the police. Because last year we called the police out, the one that was responsible for killing Sister Miriam Terry over in Washington. He lives in Frederick, and I called him out publicly. And so these fraternal and sororities didn't like that. They sided with the state, saying Y2 is a troublemaker. You know, stay away. They stayed away, but people came to the community and showed the appreciation and commended us for keeping that event inside the Black community. That's what I wanted Keela and Jared to speak on that. But you know, so when you come up here, not everybody is a plowshare. You know, some of us have been, you know, doing our due diligence and been working.
So Brandon, before we take off, and I want to thank everyone for coming on, and we should do this more. And as we talk about social media, it almost kicks my own self in the teeth because I try to do these shows ultimately, no matter what, whether it be my other shows where I talk about mental health, whether it be my other shows where we have You Be the Judge, where we talk about legislation, legal issues, and things like that, whether it be the other shows where we talk about things that are doing amazing things and highlight them because people are out here working a service. But we talked about social media, how it's propaganda. Ultimately, people got to do their own research. They got to dig their own information. They have to understand. And then they have to ask the question and say, hey, Brandon, I heard this. Is this what you're saying? Well, I'm glad you asked the question. And here, let me clear it up for you. Instead of running with, a tennis ball and thinking it's a football. You have to figure out what game you're really playing if you're thinking you're holding the same ball in the same court. So, Brandon, succinctly give the information how people can reach to you, and give where they can come and have another conversation. Or would you like to just do this once a month so we can build that conversation? Because people need to have a conversation and get an understanding, and then hopefully, ultimately, it goes into an action.
Yes, absolutely. So we definitely can be reached at uppmaryland.org on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at UJIMA People's Progress Party. But I also wanted to add that in that Frederick corridor that's going towards, Western Maryland and beyond to West Virginia, I think it's Allegheny, Garrett, and Washington County, if I believe those are the remaining three counties that's going to the west before you cross over to another state. There's definitely there's a possibility that a nucleus could be built, from individuals and organizations, small organizations that have an understanding or seeking to be understood and to build understanding in community like ours online that we're looking to build. So if that's possible, then I look at it as, hey, well, it's 23 counties. There goes four: Frederick, Washington, Garrett, and Allegheny, that's already on board with building an independent alternative in their community. They can hold on to, their interests, their ideas, but what we want is to have a sound class analysis by working as an independent Black worker-led political class analysis that adheres to the interests of us, so we're able to have honest conversations about substance and remove the symbolism. We can talk about initiations and initiatives and remove the images and the illusions of being included in positions, because we've all heard the saying, you're either at the table or you're on the menu. So instead of us even deciding which place that we are, we're coming to flip the table over and bring our own table to the place and say, hey, this is where we stand. This train is going in the opposite direction of where everyone else is going, because again, we rather look crazy as the bulls going the opposite way of the cliff where all the other bulls are headed over and going down and don't know what's at the bottom. Call us crazy for wanting to build something different, but at least we have an idea about what our class interests are through our class analysis and material need that is right now. Not tomorrow, not 5 years, not 4 election cycles, not 2 Democrats or Republican later, right now. So you can definitely follow us at UJIMA People's Progress Party on all platforms. But tonight we're having a discussion around reparations. We are not experts on reparations, but we encourage, if anyone's available, to be able to, put the link inside of the chat so that way we're able to reach out and have folks come and be a part of the material discussion about what does reparations look like from an independent political perspective, not what the Democrats would say, well, hey, everyone gets 2 keys in a Cadillac. Like, no, we're not doing that. Instead, what does it look like from our perspective? Because I believe that it's, it can't be priced, because we got too many political prisoners and too many people who have been killed and murdered, and too many stories that haven't been shared in an ocean of tears from families that have been murdered through colonialism. But I'll stop there. I can go on and on, but I really have to stop. Thank you.
Well, we don't have to stop. We can continue at another time. But as we close off the show, I want to thank Brandon. I want to thank all of people showing up. Watu, yourself, Jared, and Akila. Thank you so much for coming on. We're going to have this conversation again. Like I said, I think this needs to be continuous and continue on. You can always reach the show. You can put in Bridges Live, and I will send everyone the link for personal so you can repost and things like that. But ultimately, let's keep talking and let's keep educating, because this doesn't move forward without each other. So even if we have what you call disagreement, we shouldn't have discourse. So
Yeah.
let's understand that.
Yes.
I'm Dr. Paul Dyer. This is Bridges Lives Presents UJIMA, People's Progress Party Conversation. This is not the last, but it is definitely the first. Thank you so much, and thank everyone for listening to Bridges Live Presents. And I will be with you guys all. Remember to catch the show. You Be the Judge every Wednesday at 6 p.m. You also know that we talk about legal issues, voting issues, and the things that just happens to our people. You guys have a blessed night. Be kind, be compassionate, and be safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.